Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. The garbage time touchdown. When a team scores a touchdown super late in a game that has already been decided, and scores a touchdown that means absolutely nothing. It's the NFL equivalent of the Chris Paul huge three-pointer to cut the lead down to 42. You've all seen what a garbage time touchdown looks like before. It's not this super rare occurrence by any means. But not all garbage time touchdowns are created equally. Some of them, heck most of them, get forgotten immediately after they happen, simply for how little impact they have on a player's career, or most importantly in today's day and age, the spread or the over-under. Some of them are remembered because they are the exact opposite, and they ended up having a long-term impact on a player's career, as it was their first touchdown or something along those lines, or because it was a legendarily bad beat that you'll see on SportsCenter that Monday night with Scott Van Pelt. But the garbage time touchdown that we're going to talk about today that happened more than 55 years ago is something to behold. The touchdown itself was quite ordinary. Heck, if I didn't give any context or play any audio, this garbage time touchdown would not look any different from any of the other garbage time touchdowns that you've seen. It's not as though this was a 99-yard touchdown, or a diving one-handed grab, or a play where the man broke 7 tackles on his way to the end zone. Having said that, if you ever wanted an example of just how cheap the Patriots used to be back in the day under owner Billy Sullivan, this is that moment. This feels like something straight out of the movie Semi-Pro, because in 1968, when Gino Cappelletti scored a touchdown during a game against the San Diego Chargers, let's just say it was absolute chaos. Because with the two teams playing each other on Sunday, if you're watching as of this video getting released, 55 years later, this is the story behind the craziest garbage time touchdown in Patriots history, and quite possibly pro football history. Before I talk about the actual touchdown itself, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, how it was going, and most importantly, just how dirt cheap owner Billy Sullivan was, to the point where a touchdown like this is all the more crazy. It's November 10th, 1968. It's the 9th game of the AFL season, and we've got a battle on our hands on a rainy day over at Fenway Park between the San Diego Chargers and the Boston Patriots. The good news was that this was an absolutely monumental game that could dictate the future of the season, as the San Diego Chargers entered this one at 6-2. Back in 1968, only the division winner made it to the playoffs, so it was win or go home. If you didn't win your division, or at the very least, tie for your division lead, you were straight out of luck. The Chargers were in a dogfight in the West, sitting at 6-2, while the Oakland Raiders were 6-2, and the Kansas City Chiefs were a half game ahead at 7-2. If the Chargers won this game, they'd get into first place in the division, and would keep pace to keep their playoff hopes alive. The bad news was that for the main subject of our story, the Boston Patriots, this was not a monumental game at all. In fact, this season had been a disaster for Boston, who entered this one at 3-5, with their playoff hopes all but dashed with how much of a gap the Jets had on first place. The Pats were one of the worst teams in the league, boasting the worst offense in the league at just 128 points scored, or 16 points per game, boasting the second worst defense in the league at 217 points allowed, or over 27 points per game, and the second worst point differential in the league at -89, with only the Buffalo Bills being worse. There's a reason they got that coveted number 1 overall draft pick to get O.J. Simpson. After a 2-1 start to the season, where things may have looked promising, the Pats had dropped 4 of their last 5 and each of their last 2, with the only win in that stretch coming against Buffalo. No one thought that the Patriots had any chance at winning this game, seeing as the Chargers were 13-point favorites. And they were right, because as you can tell from these highlights, this game was all Chargers, as through the first 3 quarters of the game, San Diego led it by a score of 27-3, with the outcome of the game never in any doubt. The Patriots could not hold on to the football, turning it over 4 times. Undrafted rookie quarterback Tom Sherman definitely looked like an undrafted rookie on this day, as he went just 12 for 36, completing 33% of his passes. 2 out of 3 ain't bad when it comes to Meatloaf, but when it comes to the percentage of passes that fall incomplete, not so much. Along with going 12 for 36, Sherman threw 3 interceptions and posted a passer rating of 16.9, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. Boston had nearly 100 fewer yards than San Diego did, and when you combine their offensive struggles with a run defense that wasn't the best, seeing as Russ Smith on the other side had 93 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on a whopping 7.1 yards per carry, yeah, it wasn't exactly pretty. Having said that, even though this game was well and truly decided, especially after the Patriots scored a touchdown in the 4th quarter to make it 27-9, and opted not to go for 2 to try making it a 2-possession game for some reason, instead, taking the extra point to keep it at 3 scores and a 27-10 deficit, even though the 2-point conversion existed in the AFL, there was one storyline to pay attention to. There was one storyline on everyone's mind. And that storyline involved one of the few bright spots for Boston, which was this man right here, a man by the name of Gino Cappelletti. Now, we all agree that the greatest Patriot of all time is Tom Brady, because, well, duh. No further explanation needed. But the battle for number 2 is fierce between quite a few players, including John Hanna, Rob Gronkowski, and the man you're watching right now, Gino Cappelletti. Cappelletti is one of the greatest players not just in Patriots history, but in American Football League history. By this point in his career, he was a 5-time AFL All-Star and a former AFL Player of the Year in 1964, who was a threat not just on special teams as a kicker, but as a wideout on offense. In 1961, Cappelletti, due to his contributions on both offense and special teams, led the AFL in points scored. He finished second in this category in 1962, then led the league again in 1963, 64, 65, and 66. It's actually kind of remarkable that Cappelletti is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because he is one of the greatest players in AFL history, especially since besides his great kicking ability, he had 4 seasons where he was inside the top 10 in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. Heck, his 1964 season, where he scored 155 points, was the AFL record for most points scored in a single season, and up until 1983, was the second most points in pro football history, only behind Paul Hornung in 1960. It was inside the top 5 as recently as 2002, even with all the rule changes and the expanded schedule. And I bring all of that up because with how well Cappelletti was playing, and because of how important he was to the Patriots and the AFL as a whole, he was approaching a big-time milestone. Entering this game, Cappelletti was at 993 career points. When you combine his touchdown score, his extra points, and his field goals, he had scored 993 points in his career. 7 more points, and he'd hit the 1,000-point mark, which is a remarkable feat for any player in any era, but especially back in 1968. In the near half-century-long history of pro football, only 2 players by this point had crossed that mark, with those guys being Lou Groza, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, and George Blanda. Cappelletti was already comfortably in 3rd place on the all-time list, but 1,000 career points would truly etch his name into pro football history. And prior to the play that I'm going to show you, Cappelletti was on 997 points, hitting a 35-yard field goal in the 1st quarter and an extra point, so 4 points compared to what he had before. With the Patriots driving, a field goal for Cappelletti gets him 1,000 on the dot, and a touchdown for him crosses the mark. Either way, it's very likely, barring anything crazy at this point, that he's going to hit the mark in this game. And by this point, The Patriots were freaking out. Because if there's anything you have to understand about the Patriots, they were dirt cheap. They were so cheap that they made Colorado Rockies ownership look like Manchester City. And that's not an exaggeration. I've talked before about just how cheap the Patriots were back in the day under owner Willie Sullivan in the 1960s, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But if you just want a brief synopsis, here's the rundown. At a time where football teams had scouts that traveled across the country to evaluate talent and talk to players in college, the Patriots had just one. The Patriots used friends and relatives to do jobs that professionals do otherwise, even if they were not qualified whatsoever. The Patriots, if they ever got into a bidding war with an NFL team for a player before the era of the common draft, rarely won, because the Patriots didn't offer competitive prices, and didn't even meet with said player in person. The Patriots did not have a doctor on road trips, making them the only team in the league to not have one. The Patriots did not have a director of player personnel, which was a common position at the time. Their taxi squad was the smallest in football. The Patriots refused to fly to games until the day before, even if the game was on the West Coast, in order to save on hotel costs. And they were so cheap that in 1965, they literally did not have a play caller. The man that called the plays was Charlie Green, who was a 13th round rookie quarterback. Instead of having a designated play caller like every other team, they just threw a rookie into the fire and said, you do it, which went about as well as you'd expect. Gino Cappelletti, as in the man you've been watching this whole time, was about the one good thing that they had going for them, because Billy Sullivan makes Mr. Krabs look like Jerry Jones. And with Cappelletti approaching 1,000 points, being at 997 prior to the play in question, they absolutely needed him to score a touchdown and not a field goal. It had to happen with a touchdown. The reason why? If it was a field goal, it would go into the stands. The monumental ball would go into the stands and be caught by a fan, which meant that if the Pats were going to get that 1,000th point ball, which they absolutely needed, because this was history, and maybe Cappelletti wanted the ball for himself, then they would have to pay the fan off. And let's just say that the Patriots were in no way whatsoever prepared to pay a fan off for the ball. The offer that the Patriots were prepared to give to the fan for the ball, which they absolutely needed if it went into the stands on a field goal, was an autographed team football. Seriously. No cash, no season tickets, no benefits, no nothing. An autographed football for one of the worst teams in football. And let's be real, I'm not sure how many fans are taking that offer. I'm sure there are going to be people who say, wait, that's it? Nah, I want more than that. This was a piece of history. Can you imagine if someone caught a 700th home run ball and the team offered that? Can you imagine if the team said, we'll trade you this ball for a different ball, even though this ball holds significantly less value and historical importance? It is laughably cheap. Just thinking about that, which would most fans rather say and display in their home? Gino Cappelletti's 1,000th point, or an autograph from the third-string quarterback on the team that will likely not be legible in a few years' time? They had no plan. If that was a field goal that went into the stands, they were completely and utterly screwed, because they were not prepared to fork over any cash whatsoever to retrieve a piece of history. And so, with the Patriots down 27-10, this happened. Tom Sherman drops back to pass, and with Gino Cappelletti running to the corner of the end zone, Sherman hits Cappelletti for a 19-yard touchdown. Just like that, history was made. Cappelletti scored his 1,000th career point, or 1,003rd to be exact. The crisis was averted. The Patriots were joyous, not because their franchise player did something historic, but because they wouldn't have to spend any money. And you might notice something after the touchdown, how Patriot officials on the field immediately swarm Cappelletti to guard him and make sure that the football does not get into the stands. The moment he catches that football, a Patriots member is running up to him and approaching him to get the ball and guard it like it's his baby, not even giving Cappelletti a chance to give it to the referee, or toss it, or pull a Homer Jones and spike it, or do anything along those lines. We want that ball so we don't have to pay out anything. That's the real victory on this day. Gino Cappelletti's touchdown in the game between these two teams behind me right here ended up meaning nothing on the final score. The touchdown plus extra point made it 27-17, and that was how the game ended. So it was pretty meaningless, although the spread was 13 points, so maybe it did mean something to some. Now, Cappelletti would finish his career with 1,130 career points, which was the third most in pro football history at the time, only behind Lou Groza and George Blanda. And at the time of his retirement after the 1970 season, he would still be one of just 3 men to cross that 1,000 point mark. But let me know in the comments down below. Do you think that Gino Cappelletti should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Personally, I think so, but I would love to see what you guys think down below. It's actually kind of crazy when you think about it. If that ball was a field goal instead of a touchdown, I highly doubt that the ball is immortalized in Patriots history, because they would be too cheap to get it back. The offer that the Patriots gave boiled down to, in essence, we'll trade you this ball for a different ball, even though the 1,000th point is way more valuable, and just about anyone with a brain would have realized that, and wouldn't have taken the Patriots up on the worst trade offer of all time. Yes, this touchdown was a garbage time touchdown, and meant absolutely nothing in the game itself, as the Patriots still lost 27-17. But 55 years later, this touchdown is still remembered in pro football history, not just because it was the 1,000th point for an absolute legend, but because it saved the Patriots a ton of embarrassment, and most importantly for the notoriously cheap Billy Sullivan, a crap ton of money. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.